Yeah.
Good afternoon, teachers. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present in front of you a very, very important topic. Something that is that can be treated in the emergency department itself and can be very gratifying. So I'll start with a clinical history. So this was a 46-year-old diabetic. Sir, am I audible?
Yes,
Yeah,
very much audible.
You are audible. You are only 8 minutes time. Only 8 minutes time.
Yes, sir. So this is a 46-year-old diabetic hypertensive female patient who presented to us with a history of fever for 5 days with dysuria and acute onset shortness of breath for the last 2 days. And a random blood sugar done at the ER itself was 426 with evidence of metabolic acidosis in the ABG. So our provisional diagnosis at this point of time was probably a case of diabetic ketoacidosis because of a stressor event, probably a urinary tract infection. She was on the following drugs of sitagliptin 50 milligrams, dose of 2 grams of metformin, a 2 milligram dose of glimepiride, atorvastatin, and telmisartan of 40 milligrams. So having said this, we then so this was the ECG which was done at the emergency department, which basically showed peaked T waves in leads 2, V5 and V6. There was Q waves present there, as we can see in lead V1 and V2, which are showed by arrow marks, and ST elevation in V1 and V2, which can occasionally be also found in other conditions, which I'll be discussing later. So this was the ECG department. With ECG at the emergency, her potassium came out to be around 7.8, and she was treated. So what are the basic ECG changes that can occur in hyperkalemia? We know that hyperkalemia produces a distinctive sequence of ECG which can affect both the depolarizing segment and the depolarizing segment. The depolarizing segment would obviously involve the QRS complexes, whereas the repolarization will involve the STT segments. So the first change that we can see is a tall, tented, and peaked T wave, followed by flattening of and loss of P wave, followed by PR interval prolongation. There will be widening of QRS complexes, ultimately resembling a typical sine wave appearance, and these can also give rise to various arrhythmias in these patients. So this is another ECG of a patient of hyperkalemia. As we can see that there are tall, tented, peaked T waves. This is an ECG which shows P waves absent with QRS complexes which are broad. This was a ECG which we repeated after treating that patient with various modalities for hyperkalemia and at the time of discharge. So regarding the T waves, if I have to talk about T waves, there are certain things that we need to know about the T waves. That normally the T wave is representative of a ventricular repolarization, which is formed at the end of the last phase of ventricular repolarization. Regarding abnormal T wave etiologies, we have a host of causes. They can also be found normally in certain patients, and they can be found in abnormal conditions as well. Now, about the differentiation between a tall peaked T waves of hyperkalemia and acute coronary syndrome, the difference between the T waves of AMI and increased hyperkalemia is that in acute coronary syndrome, the T waves will be broadened and peaked and will be corresponding to that particular lead of artery occlusion. Whereas in hyperkalemia, it will basically not follow any rule of any specific involvement of any artery. Now, T waves can also be found in ventricular hypertrophy, depending on the distribution of precordial leads. And additionally, we need to know that T waves can also be present in a normal variant. There can also be causes of inverted T waves, which we'll be knowing later. However, inverted T waves are a very common cause of ischemic heart disease. And we also know something called Wellens sign or Wellens syndrome, where it is basically defined as symmetrical inverted T wave in anterior and in the anterior precordial leads, which is suggestive of LAD proximal involvement. This is the case history of the second patient, a 64-year-old hypertensive patient presented to us with severe profound weakness and on clothalidone 2.5 mg. So this is the ECG, which basically shows small T waves with which basically shows small T waves with profound or prominent U waves. So just as hyperkalemia causes tall waves, we need to know that hypokalemia causes small T waves. Now, just a word about U wave. U wave is most clearly visible just after a T wave, and it is usually present in leads V2 to V3. We need to know that U waves also are more profoundly found in patients who are on the bradycardic side, whereas U waves are generally not found in patients who are who have a pulse rate towards the side of tachycardia. U waves really actually represent repolarization of the interventricular septum or also of the Purkinje fibers. So what are the ECG changes that we can find in hypokalemia? It is a small T wave. There might be evidence of first degree heart block. There might be ST segment depression. And sometimes, although rarely, but we do find prominent U waves in these patients. This is the third patient, a 48-year-old male subject with a history of parathyroid adenoma who presented to the emergency department with nausea, vomiting, and abdominal pain. And this is the typical ECG that we found in this patient. In this patient, we find that there is short QT interval. And if we calculate the QT interval, it comes to around basically around 300 milliseconds of QT corrected in interval. So this is a typical case of hypercalcemia where we find short QT interval, and this short QT interval is basically because of abnormal rapid ventricular rapid repolarization. And in these cases, we might also find prominent U waves. Regarding QT intervals, we already also go by the formula of QT by the square root of RR interval. And if it is less than 390, irrespective of the sex of the patient, it is short QT interval. If it is more than 450 in men and more than 460 in female, we call it as a prolonged QT interval. Just to elucidate about how to approach a case of QT segment, QT interval abnormalities. If there is short QT interval, we basically think clinically of 4 causes. One is hyperkalemia, one is hypercalcemia, the other one is probably the patient is on digoxin, and the other one is a rare syndrome called the congenital short QT syndrome. In hypocalcemia, we can find QT segment prolongation or sometimes ST segment prolongation, which is again classically known as stretching out of ST segment. When we find a case of prolonged QT interval, we basically think of whether, again, clinically, whether it is a case of hypocalcemia, whether the patient is on any drugs that increase QT intervals. Classically, quinidine, procainamide, or flecainamide can classically cause prolonged QT interval. Whether this is a case of long QT syndrome, that is a Romanov-1 syndrome, can also cause a long QT syndrome. And sometimes hypothyroidism or hypothermia classically, along with HOCM, can classically cause QT segment prolongation. So this is one diagram that I wanted to share about the differences, how we can find in between a normal ECG. On the left, we have hypocalcemia, which has prolonged QT interval. And on the right is a typical case of hypercalcemia, which presents with a short QT interval. To the last two electrolytes about hypomagnesemia. Hypomagnesemia is basically, again, comes with prolonged AQR interval, a prolonged QT interval. There might be atrial and ventricular ectopics. These might, again, multiple ventricular ectopics might predispose to development of ventricular tachycardias and torsades de pointes. And also hypomagnesemia, typically like hypokalemia, does accentuate digoxin toxicity. This is a case of hypomagnesemia with prolonged QT interval. Coming to hypermagnesemia, this is again presents with increased PR interval of more than 0.2 seconds and QT interval. There might be prolonged QRS duration. There might be peaked T waves and flattened P waves, and also might present also sometimes in rare cases with severe hypermagnesemia, may present with complete AV block and also asystole sometimes. So just before I end my talk, I would just like to go back to my first slide, and if we can know this slide properly, I think we will help a long way in going and knowing all about the mechanisms of dyselectrolytemia and ECG changes. So here we have 4 phases. The phase 4 is at rest, where there is little spontaneous depolarization because the sodium potassium ATPase produces a negative signal. Okay, so I would just like to conclude by saying that an ECG is sometimes obtained on patients shortly after they arrive in the ER. And we basically almost think that it is probably because of ischemic changes, but they can also give a very important early insight into the electrolyte changes, and prompt emergent treatment can actually stabilize the cardiac membrane and give a long way in giving relief to those patients at that moment of time. Thank you, sir.